So, a quick message to the autistic husbands out there. Your neurotypical wife's feelings are a fact. If she has particular emotion going on inside of her, that emotion is a fact. For example, let's say that she lost her father recently, and she is grief-stricken at the loss of her father. That sense of loss, that feeling of grief is literally measurable if they were to do a brain scan. So that feeling is a fact. If she says, for example, I'm feeling sad that I don't get some of my intimacy needs met, that feeling is a fact. And you might say, well, Mark, she said, I feel that you don't love me. And I do love her. That's not a fact. You're right. Because if she says, I feel that you don't love me, that's not a feeling. That's a thought. So sometimes she will say, well, I feel such and such, and it's technically not a feeling, it's a thought. So her thoughts are not necessarily facts, but her feelings are, and so are yours. So when she's expressing her feelings, don't view it as, oh, she's so emotional, and oh, that can't be true. You don't feel that way. No, I'm sure she's not lying about her feelings. If she says she feels a certain way and she's actually using an emotion rather than a thought, she's not lying. That's what's going on. So when she's talking to you about her feelings, don't chalk it off as just a bunch of psychobabble with no factual basis. If you're feeling a particular way, let's say you're feeling mad at her, and I say, no, you don't feel mad. That's not reality. No, you would say, by God, I am mad, and it is a fact that I'm mad. So you understand now that feelings are facts. Quick message to guys on the autism spectrum. You've heard of fighting for things that are important to you, right? Your wife is fighting because you're important to her, but you're missing the second part. You just view it as fighting. So autism is no respecter of persons any more than Hurricane Ian was a respecter of people in Fort Myers Beach, Florida, for example. It doesn't respect the person who has autism. It doesn't respect the person who's married to the person who has autism. It's been around for a long time, allegedly a few hundred years, and a lot of people suspect that it's been around since day one. So it's not going anywhere. Not anytime soon. It is what it is. Don't take it personally any more than you would take Hurricane Ian personally. Well, I can't believe that hurricane just happened to tear down my house. I'm taking that as a personal affront. Hurricane wasn't concerned about you, wasn't thinking about you. It had nothing to do with you. Now, having said that, you can still feel the pain associated with being involved in the event, on the receiving end of maybe a meltdown from your autistic husband, on the receiving end of storms that tear up your house. So I'm not saying you're not affected by it, but I am saying that it is something that exists in the universe, and you can either fight it or accept it. But if you fight it, it always wins. So a new term for you, BTD syndrome. That's brutal truth denial syndrome. Brutal truth denial. The guy on the autism spectrum thinks, I don't have that disorder. I've looked at an informal quiz online. I don't have those traits. That's not me. I can't have sensory sensitivities, weak central coherence, problems with prediction, executive function deficits. It can't be that I have a disorder that means my emotional age is stunted. It's just not possible. And then she, in this case the NT wife, goes, no, he doesn't have a disorder. He's just a fucking narcissist. He could do better if he just tried harder. Yeah, okay, BTD. Both of y'all are in denial about what's going on. Why is that a problem? Because if you convince yourself that you don't have the disorder, or if you're the NT spouse, you convince yourself that he could do better if he would just try harder, then the both of you make a bunch of false assumptions on what's really going on. And you label it other stuff. The guy on the autism spectrum labels himself as a social failure. The NT wife labels him as being uncaring, selfish, insensitive, narcissistic, sociopathic, and so on. So you end up labeling it something that's not even in the ballpark, which means you have not identified the problem, which means you cannot problem solve. That's a problem. If you have an overly logical brain, you have an overthinking brain, which means that sometimes you may get stuck on a thought Sometimes you may get hyper-focused on one detail. It may be hard for you to know where to begin, and then once you begin, it may be hard for you to move on to step two. It may be hard to see the big picture. It may be hard to generalize. An overly logical brain is not altogether a great thing, but the other 90% of the time, it is definitely your greatest strength. And you will have other strengths that a neurotypical male will not have. You will be able to systematize better. You'll be much better at facts, figures, numbers. You're likely to be more, on average, have a higher IQ than the typical male. Quick message to the NT wives out there. You need to begin engaging in some forms of escapism. Your autistic husband does that. He does maybe some version of a shutdown. And so he's over there decompressing, playing video games or on the computer, or doing something where he is basically decompressing while you're over there compressing. So he has his forms of escape. You need to find your forms of escape and use them frequently. I know this may go against the grain of your wanting to charge in there and tackle relationship problems, especially when you're upset. That's not escape, that's imprisonment. I'm not saying never try to tackle problems, but you need to find some ways to decompress too. You know, what are some forms of escapism? Sleep, vacation, leaving the house for a while, going to the gym, working out, hot shower with some wine, meditation. There's all kinds of ways to escape. You got to start hunting those ways down and using them, because you're the one that's getting mentally sick over this neurodiverse marriage problems. Not him. He's escaping. He's unwinding. He's relaxing. He's engaging his parasympathetic nervous system. He's reducing his cortisol and adrenaline levels. Why aren't you? Escapism, ladies. Come up with some ideas. Implement pronto. A help-rejecting complainer. She doesn't want the problem solved, because whenever the problem is solved, she's lost the thing to complain about, and her big payoff is in the complaint. I fully understand wanting to vent, but if you just want to vent without follow-up with problem solving, I can't help you. If you just want to vent and we're just going to leave it at that, then I'm not interested in listening to your venting. If you want to vent and then we talk about solving the issue, I'm all ears. I'm not trying to be insensitive or uncaring. I'm trying to be a problem solver. If she's not going to be a team player, she just wants to complain, well, I'm not playing that game. I'm not going to be your doormat. And so, okay, whenever you want to tackle the business of actually problem solving, let me know. In the meantime, I'm not going to just sit here and take it. You left the door open then. This isn't a version of you shutting down. You told her you have the option to come back to me when you want to actually problem solve. But you've also set some boundaries. I'm not just going to sit here and let you dump on me. So you're setting boundaries, but you've also left the door open for her. Now she gets to decide. Do I just want to be a help-rejecting complainer, or do I want to solve the damn thing? Quick message to the NT spouses out there. Imagine sitting down, being forced to sit down at a poker table and play poker, and you have no freaking idea how to play poker. Okay, everybody else does. You're the only one that doesn't know. But you got to play the game. You got to try to figure it out fast. That's how your autistic spouse feels in social and emotional situations that are over his head. Quick message to NT spouses. Think of your autistic husband as a battery, and he will only be able to engage in social activities that are laden with emotional intricacies for so long before his battery is dead. And how does he recharge his battery? He goes and engages in his special interest. Do you not realize that your autistic spouse would be exhibiting those same autistic traits even if you weren't around? So why would you want to make it about you? Okay? You say, well, he doesn't care about my feelings. No, he doesn't see your feelings. You have grossly underestimated how severe this is, and you have made a ton of false assumptions. I'm not important to him. He doesn't love me, doesn't care about me. His work's more important than I am. And you've made all of these evaluations and judgment calls. And I'm not saying he can never be insensitive. I'm not saying he can never be an asshole. I'm sure he can. But the other 90% of the time, the stuff that you wanted to label as insensitivity and selfishness and narcissism and so on was directly the result of one of the traits of the disorder. And this isn't to get him off the hook, by the way. He's very much on the hook. You could pick some random person off the street with autism, and he has paid the price for having these traits. It's not years that are aging you. It's your reaction, or I could say your toxic overreaction to your spouse's behavior that's aging you. So you can relax into some acceptance about some things, or you can ruminate into resentment about most things. But if you choose the latter, you have by default chosen rapid aging. Okay, so if your spouse does or says something that you download as being disrespectful, it hurts. We'll call it hurtful. But when you replay the event, now you're hurting you. Okay, so when you replay the original thing that happened once, but you've replayed it 15 times, it feels like it's happened 15 times, and then you blame your spouse for doing it to you for 15 times when it was only once. So yeah, we'll call the original event hurtful. Shouldn't have happened, it was wrong. But your replays, it's not the other person doing it to you then, now you're doing it to yourself. It is often the case that when a neurodiverse couple gets married, one has autism, one does not, that one or both parties brought some previous emotional scars into the marriage. There was some emotional disruption prior to the marriage. You bring it into the relationship, and now you're blaming one another for those emotional scars when the other person's not to blame. It's something that happened in childhood, perhaps. You'll have to do individual work in that case. If you're not okay inside with you, there's no way you're going to be able to work on the relationship problems. You got to fix you first and then work on the marriage problems second. So don't put the cart before the horse. Also, don't expect your spouse to be able to fix you. If this is something that's going on inside of you that was there before you even bumped into one another, you can't expect your spouse to fix that. Your spouse cannot heal your old emotional wounds. Hey guys, this is Mark, and I have a message to neurotypicals out there, especially the neurotypical spouses. It would be really awesome if you could have a little bit of grace and mercy and compassion for your autistic spouse, because he has a developmental disorder. That's the key term right there, developmental. That means his emotional brain is not and did not fully develop. So when he was a child, he was always lagging. His peers were always ahead of him in the social and emotional sense. They had social skills that he didn't. They had emotional intelligence that he didn't. And worse than that, he hit a ceiling at some point. So his emotional development was always behind, and then at some point it hit a ceiling. So you could have an autistic spouse, for example, and let's say he's 45 years old chronologically. Emotionally, he's more like a 14-year-old. So if you're going to connect with people in a social sense, you have to have emotional intelligence. So if you would say that your autistic spouse lacks social skills, it's because he lacks the development, a normal development of his emotional brain. So if you cannot have some compassion for that, you either lack empathy yourself for some reason, or you're simply uneducated about the developmental disorder called autism spectrum disorder, or maybe you were traumatized, bullied, rejected, teased as a child, and so now you don't have the grace and mercy and compassion to extend because you didn't get any either. He may not know exactly what he's supposed to do. You may have been very vague. You didn't think you were being vague. If you describe that same thing to one of your very intuitive girlfriends, she wouldn't think it was vague. He's going to think it's vague. So he may not know exactly what he's supposed to do, and what if he delivered now that he knows? Would you want to waste that opportunity? If he can't or won't deliver, you need to know that too. If you were going on just you were going on a tour, a hiking trip in Colorado, I'm just making this up, and you were going to have a tour guide, and you met up with this tour guide in the parking lot of the park, and there was going to be an all-day hiking thing. You would want to know if you can count on him to walk you through that. You wouldn't just go, well, I just hope this guy knows what he's doing. You'd probably go, how often have you been doing this, and how many clients have you had, and is there some certification that comes with? You would inquire. You would want to make sure that he's going to be able to walk with you and get you back safely. No different with your husband. You need to know where he stands with you and his level of commitment for your sanity and your safety. There's toxic guilt, which is, I'm always making mistakes. I never get it right. I can never make her happy. I'm always making these social mistakes, which then causes toxic shame because I'm always making these mistakes. Therefore, I am a mistake. Now he's taken his behavior as an identity. That is toxic shame. Well, you need to provide something for me. In this case, you need to convince me that you want to be with me. That translates to me, you have to say and do certain things for me to be okay, because I've pissed my power away, and now you're in charge of my feelings, and I'm full-blown codependent. So please start reading my mind and my emotions so that you can fix my feelings. When you try to control or change your spouse, resentment and resistance will be soon to follow. In case you didn't know, you give off invisible energy, vibes that are tangible, even though you can't see them. If you are in the same room with him and you're so mad at him you could chop his head off, you are giving off some negative vibes, and it will affect him at some level. And he won't even know it, neither will you, what the hell's going on. I can promise you, if you want to test this, when you're at your maddest, try to be near him and see what happens. Hey, a quick message to the spouses out there on the autism spectrum. I'm specifically referring to the husbands in this case. If we were to break things down to its most common element with respect to your NT wife's needs, she needs to feel safe. I mean, she has many needs, but that would be primary. In most cases, that would be at the top. So what can you do today to help your NT wife feel safe? Would you like to schedule a paid private coaching session? This will be in the form of a face-to-face Zoom call. Underneath any of my videos, you'll see this Calendly link. If you click on that link, it'll open up my calendar. You can pick the available days and times that works for your schedule. You'll get a follow-up email immediately after purchasing a session that will have the Zoom link that coincides with the day and time that you picked. I will get an email too that you scheduled a session, and I will be available on that exact day and time, and we will talk. I look forward to working with you. If you are in a neurodiverse marriage where one spouse is autistic and the other one is not, and you've been struggling for years and years, and you're kind of sick and tired of the routine, talk to me. Use me as your personal coach. I have groups, and I keep these groups small so that you can get a lot of one-on-one attention. I have 3 Q&A groups, one for ASD husbands, one for neurotypical wives, and I have a couples group where both spouses can attend. I also have 2 instructional groups, Cassandra Syndrome Recovery Group, to help you cultivate some strategies to recover from years of emotional deprivation, and the Men's Masterclass, in which we take a deep dive on developing social skills and emotional literacy in the context of the neurodiverse marriage. We meet 1 hour a week for 4 weeks. So how much longer are you willing to wait?